Hey everyone, it's Brandy and welcome back to my channel, Brandy Janae's Bookshelf. The point of this video is to go over all of the books that I read throughout January, first month of a new year, and I did okay. Let's get into a few of the stats, or at least the stats that I like to calculate at the end of each month. Throughout the entire month of January, I finished a total of 20 books, and over those 20 books, I read 7,201 pages with an average rating of 4.2 stars. Break down a little bit more. I didn't have any DNFs that I remember. I had 9 rereads. 8 of the books that I read, I have print copies of. 2 of them were ebooks, and then 10 of them were audiobooks, like straight audiobooks. So almost half of the books that I read throughout the month were rereads, which is not as high as I would like it to be. Let's just jump into the books that I have to talk about, and of course any books that I have already talked about in my mid-month wrap up, I will be going over descriptions and then just referring you guys back to that video for detailed thoughts. One more thing before I get started. This year I decided to try out a different reading spreadsheet. This one that I decided to try out is also a way of kind of streamlining my rating system. So if you've ever watched anything from me, I have very much base my ratings on my personal enjoyment, and I know that it's kind of hard to get a clear judgment on how I'm feeling about a book. So this year I found out G from Book Roast does, or she created this rating system basically to break down stories based off of certain elements, and using the rating systems from there to come up with a final star rating between 1 and 5. So she calls it her CAWPILE system, and the reason for that is because it's broken down by characters, atmosphere, writing, plot, intrigue, logic, and enjoyment. So each of those you rate 1 through 10, and then a summary based on that gives you your final star rating. So I tried this out and I really enjoyed it because it made me really sit and think about certain things. And so far using this, I have found that all of the ratings that I have gotten by rating each of the things has gave me a final star rating that I feel like I would have given it, so I'm going to continue playing around with this for the rest of the year. Now, after all that rambling, I'm going to get into the actual wrap up. Okay, so we're going to start off with the rereads for the month. The first one that I'm going to talk about is Vision in Silver by Anne Bishop. And this one is the 3rd book in the other series. I have already talked about this one in my mid-month wrap-up, so I'm not going to go into too many details about this one. But if you don't know anything about the series at all, it starts off following this character named Meg Corbin, who is a blood prophet, and this world is set up where it's like an alternate universe version of the world we're living in. And in this alternate universe, there are paranormal creatures that are called the Others, and they run their parts of the world. So as I mentioned, we're following this character Meg Corbin, who is a blood prophet, and she escapes from the facility that she's being held at, and she ends up making her way to Lakeside Courtyard. When she gets there, she applies to be their new human liaison, and she gets hired, and it's kind of just following Meg and how things are changing around them because of Meg's presence in the Lakeside Courtyard. The next reread that I have is actually an entire series, and that is the Luck series by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and I believe I talked about this in my mid-month wrap-up as well. So this one is a story that is following Katie after her and her mom move from Florida to a small town in West Virginia that consisted of obsidian, onyx, opal, Origin and Opposition. The last of the rereads that I'm going to be talking about is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. This one starts off following this assassin named Selena Sardothian. She was captured before the book started, and she has spent the last year in Endovir, which is a slave camp, I guess, that is based around salt mines. And at the beginning of the story, she's pretty much brought before the Crown Prince of Ardenland and informed that she has the opportunity to compete to become the king's champion. And of course, she wants to get out of this slave camp, so she decides to take them up on their offer. And if you know anything about the series, then you know that this is only the beginning of the story. If you don't know anything about it, I'm not going to get into details because there's so much that happens over this span of, I think, 7 or 8 books. By the end of January, I read the first 3 books in the series. So those consist of Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and Heir of Fire. Those are the first 3 books in the Throne of Glass series. I'm actually currently in the middle of book 5 in this series. I read all 3 of those, and that's where my my 9 rereads for the month came from. Now that I have finished talking about my rereads for the month, let's get into all of the books that I read for the first time. All right, moving into my 3-star reads. I didn't have anything below 3 stars for all of my new reads for the month. The first 3 that I'm going to talk about, I have already talked about in my mid-month wrap-up, so I'm just going to go through them as quickly as possible. But the first one that I finished in my 3-star section was The Roommate by Rosie Dannon. And this is this dual perspective story following Clara and Josh. So at the beginning of the story, or I guess even technically before the story starts, Clara's childhood crush invites her across the country from New York to LA to come stay with him over the summer. And she normally is very strict with what she does, and she doesn't really stray off her dedicated path, I guess is the best way to say that. However, she decides that she's going to take a leap of faith. You know, she very rarely gets an opportunity like this, and she decides to go stay with him for the summer. However, when she gets there, she finds out that her friend slash crush, his band just got booked to open up or have a tour or something that was going on, and he's like, hey, I'm actually leaving out, and I rented out my room, so bye. And now she's forced with living in this apartment or house with this guy that she knows nothing about. And then eventually, through some circumstances, she finds out that he actually works in porn, and that sets off a whole nother side of things. So as I mentioned, this is one of the books that I have already talked about in my mid-month wrap-up, so you guys can go check out that for thoughts about that. So the next one that I'm going to talk about is Check Please Book 1 by Ngozi Ukazu. So this one is following this character named Eric Biddle, who was previously a figure skater. However, now he is on his college's hockey team, and we're kind of following his journey through that as he's like vlogging his experience joining this team, as well as him baking. Didn't mention this, but this one is a graphic novel, and it follows pretty much the first 2 years of Eric's time in college. This one I gave 3 stars, but it is also one of the ones I talked about in my mid-month wrap-up, so go check that one out for thoughts on why this one got 3 stars for me. The next one that I have is After the Rain by Nnedi Okorafor, and this one is actually a comic. It is a graphic adaptation of a short story called On the Road, and it's following a character named Chioma as she goes to visit some of her family that is living in Nigeria. And after she has an encounter with this boy who has a severe head injury, some things start happening that she doesn't really know how to handle, and she believes she's being haunted, but she's not really sure by what. And this is another one I gave 3 stars, another one that I did talk about in my mid-month wrap-up, so go check out once again that video for thoughts on why this one got only 3 stars for me. The next one that I have to talk about is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Burnhill. This one has been on my TBR for way too long, and I was determined to finish it. I was a little worried, but I found the audiobook, so I was able to get through it. So in this book, the people of Protectorate leave a baby as a sacrifice each year to the witch that lives in the woods bordering their town in order to keep her from terrorizing them. However, there is a witch that is living in the woods, but she is a kind and gentle witch. And every year she finds this baby that is left in the woods, and she takes this baby, travels throughout the woods in order to take the baby to a family that is on the other side and, you know, find them a loving home. During the journey through the woods, she feeds these babies Starlight. However, one year, instead of feeding the baby that she saves the Starlight like normal, she accidentally feeds the baby Moonlight, and because of that, this baby develops powers. So instead of taking that baby to live with one of the families on the other side or in one of the nicer towns, she decides that she needs to raise this baby as her own. However, as the little girl grows up, her magic is very unruly, and she's not old enough to understand how to control it or to use it in the right way. So the witch decides to bind her powers inside of her until she turns 13, so that the people around her can be safe, and, you know, and she will have the time in order to teach her how to use her magic and use it safely, I guess I should say. So some years pass, and we're seeing parts of the witch with this little girl and what's going on with their lives. And then we're also seeing this young man who lives in the protectorate. We got to see glimpses of him when he was younger as well, but now he's married and his baby is going to end up being the one sacrificed. So he decides, in order to save his baby, he's going to go to the woods and kill this witch that is requesting, or that they're sacrificing, these babies to every year. This book turned out to be a lot darker than I was expecting, especially when it came to the leaders of the protectorate. However, this just didn't keep me drawn into the story. I think it might have been the pacing, probably is what it was, and the fact that we really didn't get into too many details about any of the characters, because it was kind of following how everything is connected together in general. I think this could be a really good book to teach a lot of lessons. So if you're a teacher, this might be one you want to look into, but as of right now, I gave this one 3 stars. So the final 3-star read that I had for January was Among the Beasts and Briars by Ashley Poston. This is one of the books that I received in my Owl Crate box for 2020, but this one is following this character named Karis, who is living in the kingdom of Aloria, and her father work as the gardeners slash florists, and she's actually best friends with the princess of the kingdom. And when the king dies, of course, the princess is going to be the one that needs to take over. However, during her coronation, these beasts from the cursed woods that are surrounding their kingdom comes in and attacks and pretty much turns everyone in the kingdom of Aloria into these beasts. And Karis ends up going on the run with the crown, like the actual crown that the princess was supposed to get crowned with, and she's trying to find a village that the crown has supposedly come from in order to try to get them to help save her kingdom. Okay, so this was a very quick and easy read to get through. I ended up checking out the audiobook, and somehow I got through this one in 2 days. It was easy to get through, but one of the things I felt like is not going to be very memorable for me. I felt like there was a lot of interesting aspects of the story, like the creatures, the magic. However, I felt like a lot of it wasn't really gone into detail on, and because of that, it made it hard. Like, it was just like a very vague book. We know that these woods are cursed. We know somewhat of the reason where it came from, but why it happened, no real explanation on that. It seems like everyone around our character, like every person that she comes across, is somehow infected by these woods. However, somehow she's immune to the curse of the woods, like she was touched or something. I don't know. Never explained why she was immune to this curse. There's proof that she was like touched by the same thing that infected these others, but for whatever reason, like I said, she's immune, never explained. She also has these random magic powers, never explained. It felt like the author was trying to keep it contained, and because of that, it held it back from really flourishing into this really beautiful atmospheric story. I wish I had enjoyed this more because it had a lot of potential, but overall it just kind of fell flat, and Gave it 3 stars. So moving on into my 4-star reads, the first one that I have to talk about is To Sleep in the Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. This story is following this character named Kira Navarez. She is part of this team that is working on this planet, doing surveys and all of that stuff, before they decide whether or not it is able to be colonized. And they are wrapping up their survey mission, but on the last day she gets a message from her boss or this assignment that one of their drones or something has happened and she needs to go check it out. And when she goes to do that, she ends up stumbling upon this alien tech, and her finding that tech ends up setting off an intergalactic war. And we're kind of following her as she gets into a world of madness because of this alien tech that she found. And this is like 800 pages of just space stuff. I'm just gonna leave it at that. So I'm not gonna hold this up the entire time because this book is heavy. This pretty much gave me the vibes of the Aurora Cycle books by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, which is a YA sci-fi series. I really enjoyed this. Obviously it's in my 4-star section, but I like the fact that I think this one was kind of plot heavy, and because of that it made the story go by a lot quicker. Now that could be a detriment obviously if you're more into exploring characters and stuff like that, but I think it was done in a way where it made sense, especially for having a book so long. It could have been shorter because there were things that I felt like we didn't always need to go through, but overall I enjoyed it for the most part, and I'm hoping that there's more, because obviously where this left off, or not obviously if you haven't read it yet, but this book left off on a spot where I feel like there could be more, but I can also see it just ending there if the author doesn't have more to write. But like it seems like it should be more. So as of right now, this one got 4 stars for me. I really enjoyed it, and it's making me really excited to check out more adult sci-fi. So if you guys have any recommendations that you think I should check out, definitely leave them down below, because I would be interested in reading more. But this was just my start. I find adult sci-fi fantasy very intimidating, but I am looking forward to exploring that more. But yeah, as of right now, this one got 4 stars for me. So I don't know, I thought this video was going to be longer than it is, but I think a lot of these I'm just lumping together. Anyway, the last of the 4-star reads that I have, I'm going to talk about together because there are 2 volumes in the same series, and that is My Senpai is Annoying by Shiro Manta, Volume 2 and Volume 3. So if you haven't heard me talking about the series before, this one starts off following this character Igarashi Futaba. I'm going to keep referring to her as Futaba throughout the rest of this review, or whatever you want to call it. But she starts a new job, and she, as you can probably see from the cover, she looks really tiny. Like, she's so tiny that she looks like a little kid. And she ends up working under another employee named Takeda Harumi, who I will refer to as Takeda throughout the rest of this. They have this like weird relationship because she is really annoyed that he's always commenting about her size and treating her like a kid sometimes. However, they are really close. It seems like they hang out a lot outside of work. And at the beginning of volume 1, there is a mention from another one of their co-workers about them possibly having feelings for each other, and Futaba starts to think a bit more about it, and she realizes that maybe she feels more for him than just being annoyed at him treating her like a child. Volumes 2 and 3 kind of just continue on with the storyline, and where this is really a slice of life type of manga. Okay, so I have my niece here to join me because she doesn't want to let me finish filming, so she will be here until she decides to get up. Honestly, there hasn't been much progression, or really any progression, on the romance front. We do see that they're spending a lot more time together outside of work. I'm just hoping that we get to see a little bit more romance progression at some point, because it just hasn't been any, and I'm pretty sure that this was listed as being a rom-com. But as of right now, I just gave both of these 4 stars. I'm enjoying seeing all of their interactions together, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with the series. So moving into my 5-star reads, I only have like 2 things I guess that I'm going to mention. It's technically 3, But anyway, the next one that I have to talk about is Prince Freya by Kiko Ishihara. I have volume 2 and volume 3, which you probably can't even see either one of those covers. But this series, if you haven't seen me talking about volume 1, is following Freya, who starts off living in this small town in the kingdom of Tyr. And she has 2 brothers, air quotes on the brothers, I can't do it right now, obviously. But she ends up saving these 2 boys from being taken captive when she was younger, and her mother decides to raise the 2 boys as her own. So those are her 2 brothers. But at the beginning of the story, they come back in town to visit her. And what are you doing? And at the beginning of the story, the 2 come back to visit her, and during their visit they encounter some soldiers from the neighboring kingdom who they are on the brink of war with. After her brothers go back to the actual, like, the palace or whatever where the prince lives, she overhears those same soldiers mentioning that they're going to try to kill one of those 2 brothers, and she decides that she's going to go and warn them. However, when she gets there, she finds out that she looks exactly like the Prince of Tyr. The prince asks her to pretend to be him so that the kingdom, the neighboring kingdom, doesn't know that he's dead, and hopefully to help stop the war that is brewing with the neighboring kingdom. And volume 2 and 3 are obviously a progression of the first storyline, and just seeing Freya's story as she pretends to be the Prince of Tyr and what she gets into because of that. So I think I did talk about both of these already in my mid-month wrap up. I think I just forgot to highlight that here, but this series is really good so far. A new favorite of mine as far as manga series. I gave both of these 5 stars, and I can't wait to read the next one. Alright, and the final book that I have to talk about, which is another one that I have already talked about in my mid-month wrap-up, and that is Rereads by Jordan and Fuego, which is a YA fantasy debut. This story is following a character named Teresai, who was born from a wish that her mother made to become the new ruler of the kingdom of Eretzar, and her mother is known only as the Lady. After being raised in isolation for 11 years, she's actually sent off to compete to be one of the Crown Prince's Council of 11, and her mother made another wish that after she gains the trust of the prince, she has to kill him in order to open up the spot for her mother to become the new ruler. So the story is following Teresai as she has to try to fight against that wish that was made, that, you know, she kills the prince. And like I mentioned, I have already talked about this in my mid-month wrap-up, so you guys can go check that out for detailed thoughts. Just know that I love this. Probably my favorite thing that I have read for the entire month. Gave this one 5 stars. Those were all of the 20 books that I read throughout the month of January. It was a pretty good reading month for me, although I reread more books than I was intending to, and I didn't get to all of the books that I initially had on my TBR, but a lot of those I believe I have already rolled over. If not all of them have been rolled over to February, so be looking forward to hopefully hearing thoughts about those in the upcoming month. So yeah, that's all I have for this video. If you'd like to give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to see more from me, make sure you subscribe. Also make sure to comment down below with some of the books that you finished throughout January. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys again in the next one. Bye!